Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the Blog Cabin to chat about life. And today we're chatting about life in the Cul-de-Sac because this is a great new book by Chris Null, The Cul-de-Sac, which I ended up having to email him and tell him I was very mad at him for the way this book ended. So I'm just going to put it out there. We'll talk about that later, but I'm just going to put it out there. So Chris, before we talk about the book, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, Melissa, thank you for having me on the show. The Blog Cabin looks like a really cozy place to be. I'm excited to be here. So I am a professional writer. I've been a technology and business journalist my entire career. The Cul-de-Sac is my second novel. My first one was written over 20 years ago, and it took me that long to finally get my act together enough to finish up the second book. I'm going to promise the third book is not going to take that long.
Why did it take 20 years from the first to the second? Was life just happened, or?
Life just happened. The first book I wrote when we were about to have my first child, Zoe, who was the first book was dedicated to, and she when she was born, everything took off. So we were busy with family. I was busy with my career. Like I said, I'm a professional writer, so I write all day, and I was just burnt out from writing the first book. I didn't want to sit around and write another one. It was just so draining, and so much work goes into it. And especially if you're writing 6 to 8 hours all day, the last thing you want to do when you get home is write for another few hours on fiction. But finally, I had the idea for the Cul-de-Sac a few years ago, and I said, "Oh, this one, maybe I should just do it. I should get back in." And my kids are finally grown now, so I don't have to go to as many baseball games and Cub Scout meetings. So I finally got it together, finished the book. Still took me about 1.5 years to write it because it was all done on weekends. But like I said, now I'm in a little bit more of a groove. So we'll see how long it takes me to get the next one done.
So how long did it take you to flip your mind from being a technical writer to being a fiction writer?
I've always had a pretty good ability to switch back and forth when I need to on projects. Most of the work I do is very short form stuff, and it will take maybe, I'll spend 4 hours in a day writing on a project, and then I'll have to switch gears in the afternoon and write on another one. So I will be moving back and forth on all kinds of different topics all day long. So for me now, I feel like writing fiction is a nice little break from that kind of work where I can be more creative and I can be totally free with whatever I say. I don't have any corporate guidelines to follow, and I can make characters do the absolute craziest things in the world, and so it's very freeing. So it's not really that hard to switch back and forth. It's just having the energy to do it, I think, is the main problem.
So where do you get that energy to actually, because it took you, like you said, 20 years from your first to your second to write one. Where did you get that energy from to write this book?
I get a lot. Well, I get it from my family, who's very supportive. I get it from feedback I get from readers, and I just get it from my own motivation. I just get excited about something. I think, oh, this is going to be really fun to write. It's going to be fun for people to read. I can't wait to see what my wife will say when I show her this chapter. That's kind of what motivates me to, like I said in my acknowledgments in the Cul-de-Sac, like my family, my wife and my kids are the only reasons I do any of this. So they're the ones that keep me going.
So what are their opinions of the Cul-de-Sac? Did they like it? Were they love hate? Or is like a lot of like me, like upset with you at the ending? Was it?
I don't think my kids have read the book. They are 19 and 22, and they have their own lives. And I know my son is waiting for the audiobook, which comes out on June 10th. And my daughter, she's busy now. She's out of college. She's a professional accountant and very busy with work. And she's made it very clear that she will get to it when she has time, and that's fine. But no, my family's been very supportive. There's my aunt, the characters Lou and Judy in the book are named after my aunt and uncle, and they live in Seattle. And I went to visit them about a month ago, and they set up a funny bit with the frozen lasagna that was inspired by the book, and they had a lot of questions about the book. It was really fun to talk to them. I did a lot of signatures and autographs. It was very rewarding to kind of get that kind of fan love from your family.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about your the technical writer in you, because you actually had film critic first, or was it the wine and spirits website?
That's right, film critic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started, like I said, in technology magazines. I still write for Wired Magazine and PC World. I do a lot of laptop reviews, smart home gear, robots, pool robots, all kinds of things, technology stuff. That's been my bread and butter for my entire career. But in 1995, I decided to start writing about movies as well, because I just had a really strong interest in movies. And I thought, well, I'll just start writing about movie reviews. I'll start writing my own movie reviews, and I'll start a website to do it. Now, this is 1995. The web is very, very early. We were one of the first movie review websites on the web. In fact, we didn't even have a domain name back then. It was just an IP address. And a friend of mine who did the technical side of the site with me, he came up with a list of about 12 domains, and it was like moviereviews.com, filmreviews.com, movies to watch. It was like the most ridiculous list of amazing domain names you could imagine. But they were $100 a year back then. It was very expensive, especially for us. I was in my early 20s. And so we picked filmcritic.com because we thought that sounded the best. And then after that, the site just took off. I ran that site for about 18 years total, and I sold it to American Movie Classics Television Network, and I can't remember the year, but in the 2000s. And then I worked for them for about 3 years while they kept running it, until they decided they didn't want to have movie reviews anymore. They wanted to have big name TV shows like Mad Men and Breaking Bad. So that was a really fun little experience. It was very, very rewarding, and I've reviewed about 8,000 movies over the course of my career.
Wow.
Yeah, and amassed a collection of about 3,000 DVDs that I finally sold when we moved from California to Texas 3 years ago. Yeah, it was nuts.
Top of your head, what's your favorite movie of all time? I'm going to put you on the spot there.
Sure. Oh, no, I'm happy to tell people. Dr. Strangelove is my favorite movie ever, probably closely followed by Vertigo, Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah. So then you left that and you sold that, and then when did the wine and spirits website come in?
Yeah, so DrinkHacker started in 2007. So we are now almost 18 years in on that. And again, that was like, Film Critic was kind of winding down for me. I had other writers that were doing a lot of the writing and the reviewing. And so I thought, well, I had all this great success with filmcritic.com. Maybe I can do it again with another passion of mine, which was wine and spirits. And I had been freelance writing about wine really for years before that in San Francisco. In magazines and newspapers there, but I was only doing maybe one story every couple of months. I'd go to an event and write about it, or I'd write a story about just trends in the industry. And so I thought, well, I would love to do more wine reviews and do cocktail recipes and stuff like this, but I didn't really have an outlet for it. So I said, well, I'll just start one on DrinkHacker, and it was originally going to be a site where I did a weekly cocktail based on something in the news. Like back in the day, I invented an iPhone cocktail when the first iPhone came out. That's how long ago this was. And so stuff like that. But that quickly fell by the wayside because suddenly I was inundated with samples from brands who wanted me to write about their wines and spirits. And now it's just, we're probably 98% reviews. Again, there's like about 7 writers on the site in addition to me. And we review every day, usually 2 posts a day. Wine, spirits, beer, whatever, non-alcoholic stuff, you name it. I personally have a backlog, probably 4 or 5 months it's going to take me to get through just tasting. There's only so much you can do in a day, as you probably can imagine. But
especially if you're trying to write as well, because you got to keep your wits about you when you write. So you only taste so much.
Yeah, you learn to spit samples, and you learn to exhibit judgment when you're doing the work. But it's it's fun. I only do my tastings in the evening, usually between 5 and 6. Like at 5 before dinner, I'll do an hour of tasting and writing for DrinkHacker. It's a nice way to end the day.
Did you ever think that those 2 websites were going to take off like they did? Or did you just think, oh, it's just going to be a hobby for me?
Film Critic, I just really wanted to go see a lot of free movies. So that was my goal there. And Its success was very surprising to me. But again, there was no bar for success back then. Like Google didn't exist. We were listed on Yahoo. And that was kind of how people found us. If you got written up in Entertainment Weekly, then you were a big success. So that was a really strange time to be coming up with a new website. DrinkHacker, extremely surprising because it was only about online for about 6 weeks before all of a sudden my inbox was blowing up with brands looking for reviews. There wasn't a lot of competition back then in 2007 for wine and spirit reviews, but since then that industry exploded, especially the bourbon industry. And there are dozens, if not hundreds, of whiskey review websites right now. So the competition has gone through the roof. So nowadays, DrinkHacker is fighting for eyeballs against just so many more people doing the same kind of content. And now you also have YouTube and things like that, Instagram. Again, none of these things existed in any significant way when we started, especially as far as spirit reviews goes. Yeah, it definitely surprised me, but I was happy to do it and happy with where we got.
Yeah. Okay, I got to ask, what was in the iPhone cocktail?
Let's see if I can remember. It was a martini. I think it had like a little bit of like apple pucker, like apple liqueur in it, and garnished with like a slice of a green apple. And I think as a joke, I said, garnish it with your old flip phone. So it was a twist on an apple martini.
I just love that. Garnish it with your own flip phone. So cool.
Dunk it in there and be done with it. And look at that. The world's never turned back.
Yeah, tell me about it. So we need to take a brief commercial break. When we come back, we'll let you read part of your book.
Great.
The threats women face today are unparalleled and even more dangerous than ever before. 1 in 3 women globally has been the victim of an assault. Women are terrified and they are looking for answers.
In the book, Street Smart Safety for Women, we draw on our experiences, both personal and professional, to provide those answers. It's by women, for women. Street Smart Safety for Women is available wherever books are sold.
And we are back with Chris and the Cul-de-Sac. So you want to give us a little preview about what you're going to read from the Cul-de-Sac, and then we'll talk about the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Cul-de-Sac is basically a story about a serial killer who's living on a suburban cul-de-sac and what happens when he meets his neighbors. What I'm going to, that's not a spoiler, that's page 1. So I'm going to read to you chapter 11 in its entirety. That's 4 whole pages because the chapters in this book are very short and each one is told from a different point of view that bounces around different residents of the cul-de-sac. So I will read to you chapter 11. This is of Klaus, the serial killer in question. This is one of the few chapters that doesn't take place in the cul-de-sac. This is Klaus on a business trip in Virginia, scoping out, maybe looking for a new victim, maybe not, trying to figure out what's his next move. So I will read.
All right.
Chapter 11, Klaus. The trip to Virginia had come up suddenly and taken longer than I'd expected, but the servers were installed, the software was tuned, and the client was happy. My flight back home to California was at 7 a.m. the next day, connecting through JFK, which left me with just one evening to kill in Richmond. I did what I always did, turned to the internet to search for the best bar within 5 blocks of my hotel, preferably one with a good beer selection. There were plenty of choices, but I decided on a sort of English pub transplanted to the colonies, with soccer on TV, a pool table upstairs, and Guinness on tap. I settled in at the table by the fireplace, enjoyed a plate of sausages and potatoes, and drank deeply from my pint of locally made Vienna-style lager. It wasn't a German Helles or a Dunkel, but it was close enough, and it reminded me of home. I hadn't been back to Munich in close to a decade, and drinking the beer made me wonder if it was time to plan a trip, perhaps chain it to another work trip to the East Coast, which was pretty much halfway there anyway. The bartender was cute, but it was the 2 older women sitting together at the bar who caught my eye. Locals, definitely. Both a bit overweight, but hiding it well underneath sweaters that were baggy and, considering it was nearly 90 degrees outside, not entirely seasonally appropriate. I felt that itch. I would have been happy with either one, but I preferred the blonde. She seemed sadder and didn't talk as much. It's better when they're quiet. Perhaps the brunette was taking her out to celebrate good news at work or reporting back from a vacation with her family. I noticed the chatty brunette had a wedding ring on, the blonde did not. Of course, it would never work in a setup like this. There were two of them, and the scene was much too public, the bar too crowded. A German in Richmond would raise eyebrows. I'd spoken to the bartender about my homeland when I'd ordered the beer and the sausages. Even if the brunette left and I slid in to take her spot next to the blonde, what then? Too many witnesses and too much risk, even though I always pay in cash. If the police got nosy, someone would piece it together eventually, and my clients' offices were too close. If I were going to make a move, it would have to be outside, away from prying eyes. A pity that people didn't smoke anymore. How natural it would have been to run into her in the huddle out by the street. It would have been a trivial matter to ask her if there was another bar nearby, one with more exciting cocktails. And would she care to join me, a stranger in town, just looking for some conversation before a quick nightcap? It had worked before. Naturally, I had not attempted to fly here with any of my precious chloroform. Not easy to come by now, even on the dark web. And it wasn't like I could have had some delivered to the pub. Cyclopropane and sevoflurane wouldn't be available either unless I bribed someone to steal it from a hospital for me. If I were to do it, it would have to be the old-fashioned way. Given the limitations of working so far from home, that would probably mean a thick plastic bag over the head and holding her down for a minute or two until she passed out. There would be struggling, so we'd need to be close to an alley or some kind of dark area where we wouldn't be seen. The bag would muffle the screaming, however. My car would have to be nearby so I could get her in the trunk, or less suspiciously, the back seat. I'm reasonably sure that someone had seen me drag the consultant into the car that night in San Francisco. But as I was shoving her into the back seat, the would-be witness probably assumed she was simply drunk, not dead. That woman was tiny, though. I'm not sure I could hoist the blonde into the bar in any part of the car with any amount of grace. I realized the potatoes on my plate had grown cold as I daydreamed about a plan that was never going to happen. It would be exciting and challenging to take my first outside of California, but it would require preparations I simply hadn't had the time or forethought to complete. Perhaps I should extend the trip another day, try to get the job done tomorrow night. An even worse idea, I was being foolish and careless. Besides, I had to remind myself I had agreed that I would be done with 6. 6 was a good number, and I had nothing else to prove to anyone. 7 was not some magic number that would make everything better, any more than number 6 had. Eventually, the two women left together. There would have been no way to pull it off anyway, so why was I beating myself up? I finished the beer, paid the bill by leaving cash on the table out of habit, and walked back to my hotel, where I packed and slept restlessly for just a few hours. I was up by 4:30 in the morning to get to the airport, only to find my connecting flight from New York delayed for hours. We landed at SFO, and I fetched my car and drove back home, through the city, the sad ride down 19th Avenue, across the Golden Gate, and into the suburbs. By then it was well past sundown. The entire day verschwendet, wasted. As I made the final turn, that hard left that took you into the secluded cul-de-sac most people would unknowingly drive past, I immediately noticed the squat little house on the corner. The older couple that had lived there had moved out some months ago, and now it looked like every light was on in the place, as if the new residents were afraid of the dark. They didn't have curtains yet, and I slowed the BMW to a crawl to see if I could get a look at who was inside. There was certainly plenty of activity inside. Stacks of boxes, furniture in disarray, and several people in constant motion, carrying useless krimskrams inside. It certainly looked frantic. Hadn't these people organized their belongings beforehand, or had it all just been packed in random boxes? I counted at least 2 people inside, a man and a woman in their 40s, I'd guess, but I was certain that this was more than just one couple moving in. To be sure, it was a family moving into the cul-de-sac, and that would mean some number of children. And that was terrible news, because that would come with activity. Visiting family members, babies being pushed in strollers, birthday parties, and everyone on the lookout for danger to their precious kinder.
I will say that I would not want to live in this cul-de-sac because you have the most unique people. That's the word I'm going to use, unique people living in this cul-de-sac. I mean, I think the most normal people are the ones that move in. And they're not actually they're a little bit abnormal as well. So
yes, that's probably true. Yes.
So for you to actually bring all these characters together, and actually for the young girl that moves in, her bonding with her tutor and everything. I can't even wrap my head around how you came up with these ideas for these people and how you had them intertwine with each other.
Well, the Cul-de-Sac is based very, very loosely on the real cul-de-sac I lived in Northern California at the time. It was inspired by just none of these characters resemble really my neighbors, but there's loose ideas. Like we did have a widow on the street. We did have a single man who lived in a very large house, and we had a woman who was the widow was somebody who I never saw. I lived there for over 10 years and never once saw her in real life. And I only knew she even existed because other people on the cul-de-sac had seen her and knew her name. And so it was very surprising that to me that, yeah, you can live that close in proximity to people and not ever get to know them. So yes, your head fills in the blanks. Like, well, what happened? How did she get there? What was her life like before she ended up in that house? Or had she been there her whole life? Making up characters, I mean, that's just kind of the fun of writing fiction. There's obviously a little bit of me and a little bit of other people I know in everything. I think Eliza, the teenager in the book, is obviously modeled to some degree on my daughter at the time. I use a lot of her turns of phrase. I'm 53 years old, so writing a teenage girl is you have to rely on somebody who's actually been there. She was basically the same age as Eliza, so I knew how to kind of draw that out and imbue certain parts of her personality into the character. But everything else is just, you got to make it up. I lay in bed at night, I wake up at 5 a.m, and I think, oh, well, what's going to happen next? What will happen now? And a lot of times I'll just sit down and start typing and see where it takes you, especially in the early chapters where I'm introducing the characters and talking a little bit about their backstories. So the one thing that was really easy, though, is the character of Alex, because he was the subject of my first novel, Half-Mast, from 20 years ago. His whole story, his backstory is very, very outlined in my mind. And all I had to do was reread that book and bring everything up to speed. Of course, it was 20 years later for him, because that book was contemporaneous to around the year 2000.
So now I'm going to have to go read that book.
People really like that book, Half-Mast. It's very different than the Cul-de-Sac, but if you like the character of Alex, you'll really love Half-Mast.
But my thing is, you had so many deeply complex characters in this book. Normally, when you read a book, you maybe have one, two, maybe at the possibility, maybe just a handful. But it seemed like every character in your book had something going on in their life that nobody would even imagine going on in their life. Eliza's friend, she even had a whole backstory by herself. So how did you, in your mind, keep it straight and keep, okay, this character's going to do this character's going to do that? Because that character development it's got to be hard, but it was so well written.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it takes a lot of time and outlining and just rereading, make sure you're not making any mistakes and that you're getting the characters right. Like Jean Claire, I feel like, yeah, she's a complex character. Actually, probably a fan favorite character in the book. People love her, and I do too. But once I came upon the idea of her having like a very evangelical, extremely strict mother, the rest of it just kind of fell into place. Obviously, she's going to rebel against that, and she's trying to do anything she can to get out from under that situation. So, yeah, it just kind of builds and builds and builds. You just start writing, and then you see where the day takes you. The original book, the original first draft, which I had pitched to the publisher, Thule, had twice as many points of view. So there were twice as many characters doing the talking, including like some that were just for one chapter. And that was one of the major contributions my editor made, was we got to pare this down. It's too many. Already a lot of people there's only 8 now, and people complain that it's too many people to follow. They get lost. And I understand that now in retrospect, having heard what people think about the book. But I am glad we did not go with 16.
I can't even imagine what was going on in the other people's. Who did you cut?
Well, Well, it would have been like Lou and Judy both had points of view,
Okay.
and it would alternate between them. So you could see like an argument, and they're in the original story they were had a much more problematic marriage, and so there was a lot of fighting back and forth. So he would have a chapter, and then she would have a chapter, and he would have a rebuttal. The two detectives, they both had points of view, and they would alternate it when they'd be at the scene. So you would hear what Eisenstein, the main detective, would say, and then Simmons, kind of the underling, he would kind of approach it from a new guy perspective. And then, like I said, there was some new perspectives and some characters that were basically taken out of the book completely, who just had one-offs, like the teacher even had a chapter. And then the final chapter, actually, there was kind of an appendix, a much different epilogue, and it was Jean Claire's mother had a prayer that closed the book, and nobody got that, so we had to take it out.
Have you ever thought about going back and writing Lou and Judy's point of view for what happened in the cul-de-sac, since you already have those parts written? So I would like to know more of their story.
Those parts were really just transitioned to one point of view. So they all just transitioned to Lou. So instead of Judy having her perspective, it was all just changed to what Lou's perspective of her perspective was, like his. So all that, and most of that is still in the book. It's just been shifted so that he's hearing it and not, instead of her saying it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense.
So
who was your favorite character to write?
I always like writing Alex, and he has the same kind of sarcastic wit as me, and everybody kind of knows that he resembles me in like more ways than one. That said, I have not murdered anyone or done anything untoward like that. So he was definitely my favorite to write. However, the later chapters with Peg, and I don't want to spoil too much, those got really fun to write too.
Yeah, I can see that, because she kind of opens up a little bit and blossoms, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoops.
It's like I said, when writing fiction is at its most fun when the characters start to surprise you. How are they going to respond? And then they just take it away on the page. And when I've been working on my new book now, it's like it's two main characters interacting, so it's very intimate in these early chapters. I think this is how I have it in the outline. This is how I know what I want to happen. Then all of a sudden I'm like, well, but that's not really what he would do. And then I find myself typing something, and I was like, oh wow, this is getting a lot more dark and intense, and that's good. It's like I want that. Like I want this book to push and push and push. I don't want people to read it and go like, okay, sure, whatever, that happened, what's next? I want the book to stick with you and to generate some emotion.
So who was the first character in the book that you came up with?
Well, the first chapter I wrote is the first chapter that's in the book. It's Klaus's digging a grave, and that was the impetus for the book, because there was an incident on the cul-de-sac, and an ambulance showed up, and my next door neighbor called me out. It's like, what do you think's going on over there? It's like, you think somebody got murdered? I'm like, no, probably not, but wouldn't it be interesting if somebody did? And that was how the whole book got started. So that was the start with Klaus. He came up, and I speak just enough German to look up words and put a little bit of German into the book. Also as an aside, the narrator there's two narrators for the audiobook of the Cul-de-Sac, and they're both great. And the guy that's doing Klaus is reading it in like a little German accent, and it sounds so creepy. He's really good. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's coming out, a little over 2 weeks. So it'll be on all the Audible and everything. So that'll be great.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that, because I know when you have Kindle Unlimited, or when you have Kindle, you can always, or even iPhones now have the things where they read your screen to you, and you can basically go about your day and read a book while you're going about your day. But I can't imagine having those accents in as well, because most of the time when you get the other ones, it's like really monotone, like it's the same voice over and over again.
I did one of the computer-generated audiobooks for Half Mast, and it sounds fine, but it's nothing like the samples that I've heard for the Cul-de-Sac, which are just like so, they give you shivers to hear it. Also, it's hard to hear my own work read back to me, but that one I'm actually going to listen to. I have to, because it sounds so cool.
So why did you decide we're gonna talk about the elephant in the room, the ending, and you had to write an epilogue?
I didn't have to write the epilogue.
I will tell you.
Yes, go ahead.
I will tell the listeners and the viewers that I emailed you when you emailed me and we were setting up this whole, I was giving the talking points and everything. I'm like, man, I did not like the way it ended. And you were like, maybe this will help. And you sent me the link to the epilogue.
Well, you're not alone, which is why I wrote the epilogue. First of all, I chose that ending, like I said, and not including the original kind of stinger from Jean Claire's mother, which was a total aside. That image of that I leave with you, it's hard to say it, hard to explain it without spoiling it. But the image I had at the very last scene is what I wanted people to take in their mind, because what's behind that door. What's happened, whether you want to admit it to yourself or not, what's back there. And Eliza's life is already like falling apart right now. And so for her to open that door would just be catastrophic for her and make things even worse. So I wanted to leave a sliver of possibility of hope for that character. But even though we know, you and I, the reader and the writer, know that it's not going to work out. But for that last second, it's like Schrodinger's cat. Until she opens the door, we don't know what's inside. So I also just kind of feel like you do know what's behind that door. Everybody knows. I didn't have to write it because everybody would know. Now I understand, even though maybe you want to read it in print to be sure. And I know there are, I think what I underestimated, and again, this is the major negative feedback I've gotten about the book, is that they don't like the ending. People don't like the ending. When is the sequel coming out? Because I need to have more, right?
Yeah.
The feedback has been wonderful, but that's like, if there's a negative, that's usually what it is. Where was I going with all that? I was going to say, the other thing that I think I underestimated is how much people wanted to find out what was going to happen to Peg. And I don't want to spoil anything, but they wanted closure on that front. So that surprised me. And I think that is really why I said, when I was talking to my editor, I said, we're getting a lot of people saying they want either a sequel or they want more, they want to know what's going on. And she's like, I don't think you should write another book in this chapter and this series. And Thule is known for publishing series. Everything they do is a series, at least 3 books. And she's like, I think these characters, they've gone through this journey, they've come to an end. So it's like, I'm not ruling out that you can write a sequel if you want, she said. I think that the story it's poetic the way it is, and we should leave it there. So I said, well, what? I don't know whose idea it was. She said, why don't we just write another epilogue and put it at the end? And actually, she had warned me. People are not going to like the ending, especially people who really like mysteries. And it's not a mystery, this book is like a dark thriller. It's not a mystery. There's no, aha, we gotcha. I don't write those kind of books. I don't even read those kind of books. I read moody books. So that was the whole thing. But she said, genre readers who love mysteries are going to hate the ending. And that's why we wrote the book club questions. She said that will maybe help people kind of get their arms around where you left it. And then after that, she's like, well, let's just you can do this epilogue if you really want to kind of give people a little more, so they don't feel so mad at you because you left them hanging. And we can link to it from the book club questions. So you kind of have to find it. You kind of have to know it's there. I don't think everybody reads book club questions and looks for the fine print that says, hey, you want another chapter? Here it is. So I've been definitely trying to tell people, if you're upset, and I know a lot of people on Instagram will say like, I love this book, but I hate the ending. And then I can say, oh, well, read this. And then like, oh, thank you.
Put a pretty little bow on the ending.
Yes. Yeah.
But then I thought to myself, I'm like, he has made it so that it's going to be turned into a movie, because that's the way most thriller movies end.
Well, I am a film critic by trade historically. I really would love for it to be made into a movie or a series. There was some talk, but that's always a long shot. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about that in a couple months, but maybe the audiobook will pick up
Maybe.
the folks in LA.
Yeah, because really that's what I thought. I'm like, oh, he's gonna, and this is before I even knew the background with the film critic website. I'm like, this is like a movie, because literally when people watch movies, to watch thrillers, there's always something at the end that you don't expect, and then it ends, and then you're like, what? So you got to kind of make up in your mind a whole little story. And so I was like, that's what he's doing. He's making it so that it's going to get turned into a movie.
Well, I hope so. Do you know any producers? Call me.
Oh, I wish I did.
I'll give you a little fun fact that the role of Peg I wrote for Holly Hunter.
I can see that.
So if you can think about that, that's the main reason why she's so short in the book.
It's a Spitfire too, but very, very like not outgoing, but very set in her ways, very Spitfire. She knows what she likes.
And one of the best actresses that's around today.
So who would you have play Klaus?
That's a little trickier, but I think Christoph Waltz. Do you know him? I don't know if he's German or Austrian, but he was a villain in a Bond movie. I think it was Spectre. He's known mainly for the Inglourious Bastards, which Quentin Tarantino movie. Mm-hmm. But he's this really he plays a lot of smarmy kind of Lothario type characters, and he's obviously got the right accent for the part. But it's supposed to be, I think that part could be played by a lot of people, and is kind of a Hannibal Lecter-y type role. So obviously Anthony Hopkins is way too old for that role now.
Can you imagine Hannibal Lecter and Klaus meeting each other? Woo! What a story they would have.
All right, crossover opportunity. There we go.
So what's next for you?
Great question. Like I said, I'm working on a new book, a new novel. I'm about 22,000 words in, so it's about a quarter of the book. It is another book set in the suburbs, and it's about a rising star politician, Texas politics, who has to face his demons when his juvenile behaviors and some trauma come back into the limelight 40 years later. So the book takes place half in 1985 and half in 2025, and all here in Texas. So it's going to be a very different structure than anything I've done before, and long chapters, not short ones.
Yeah, because the thing with the short chapters is what I love is like if you're a mom and you're having to go pick up kids in the carpool line, and you're like, oh, I can just read a chapter, or you're waiting in the doctor's office or something, and you can literally read just a couple of chapters and be okay, I can stop here. Whereas when you get longer chapters, you're like, okay, you got to go back and reread it because you forgot what happened in the chapters. So I love that format of the shorter chapters.
Yeah, some of them are 1 page long, 2 pages long. So yeah, and I just gave everybody one free chapter. They don't have to read chapter 11 now.
There you go. Did you think when you were doing this that you were gonna write these types of books, these types of like thrillers, or you're talking about the guy going back and things happening in his childhood or in his young adulthood to now? Did you think you were ever going to write that, or were you just mainly basically focused on the technical writing?
I really wanted to be screenwriter when I kind of got started as a professional writer. And I think you can see kind of the short chapters. I mean, it's 80 scenes. You can feel there's a mini series vibe to the way I write. So I did do screenwriting for a long time and wrote probably 6 or 7 scripts. I had an agent in Hollywood and went out there and pitched to studios and almost got one story bought, one script bought, but that's a really, really hard thing, especially if you don't live in LA. And so eventually I just transitioned from screenwriting to novels because I just knew that it would, even if nobody wanted to publish my novel, I could publish it myself eventually. And that's what I did with Half Mast. It's a story about it's a story about a kid who murders the bully at high school. And again, that's page 1. There's no spoiler there. And the whole book is about why he did it, how he got away with it and what the impact was on his psyche years later, and that's Alex. So that I finished that book. I had an agent for that book. We took it to publishers, and then Columbine happened like within a month, and no one wanted anything to do with teen violence books anymore. It was dead in the water. So I self-published it. Again, this is before Kindle even existed. I printed books through a printer. I sold them to Barnes and Nobles and bookstores and to people directly over the web. About 3,000 copies at the time. Now it's print on demand, so it's easy to get. But I got so much great feedback from people who were just like, this was like my high school experience, just like this situation with bullies and just navigating social waters in the 80s. It was really surprising to see the kind of resonance that book had with people who had that kind of experience. And I didn't particularly have a tough time in high school, but I saw kind of what navigating that experience was like for a lot of people. So that's just where it came from. Anyway.
So let's go back to the screenwriting thing. Was it easier for you to transition do you think, from being a screenwriter to writing a full novel? Or do you think the transition would have been harder if you were a novel writer to begin with and then write a screenplay?
That's a good question. It's probably it's definitely easier to take a novel you've written and turn it into a screenplay. Adapting, it doesn't seem that hard to me. Like this book would be pretty simple, I think, to turn into a script. But I think, it's probably better to start as a novel writer because you would have that language of getting inside people's heads that you don't really get in a script. A script, you will say like people are panicked or they're, you can express that the actor should have some sort of emotion, but you're not having deep thoughts with yourself unless you're having endless voiceover scenes in your movie, which is, considered very bad taste. I would say I would encourage somebody who wants to do both, write the book first, then write the script.
I love that. So our time is almost up. Before we get into where people can find you as well as finding the book, is there one last little nugget that either you haven't shared or you wanted to reiterate of something that you have shared that you want to leave us with?
I get a lot of questions from aspiring writers, and they often ask me like, how do I become a writer? And whether they're writing in fiction or they're writing they want to become a journalist. And my answer is always the same, is that you just have to practice. You have to start writing and don't worry so much about what am I writing or where is this going to get published or how many people are going to see it. Start a blog, start a Substack, start a podcast. I don't know, start something just to start practicing, because it takes a long, long time to get even okay. I've written so many scripts that are just awful. And I've written novels too that will never be published because I was a child when I wrote them intellectually, and it was just stuff I had to get out of my system to learn what worked and what didn't. And you also have to read. You have to read the classics. You have to read the stuff that you want to screenplays. You have to go watch movies. It's all basic stuff. But I think in today's society, a lot of people want to shortcut things. Well, maybe if I just put a cool picture on Instagram, I'll get 1 million followers, and then I can write a novel, right? Yeah. Doesn't really work that way.
Unless you're already one of the rich and famous, like actors, actresses, or whatever, that want to write something and then they'll sell millions of copies.
All you have to do then is become a rich and famous actor or actress, and then you can write whatever you want.
Or pay somebody to write your story,
exactly.
Or write the book for you, and then print it out as your own.
Right. Put your name on it.
Yep, there you go.
Okay, so that's great advice.
So where can people find, I've got the Amazon link on the screen, but where else can people find it?
Unfortunately, I did not, when I set up all my social media accounts, they're all with different usernames. So the best place to get me is at my website, chrisnull.com. It's got there we go. It's got all of the links to my Instagram, Facebook, everything. And I love hearing from readers. I love hearing from people who aren't sure if they should read my book or not. I'm happy to chat with anyone. It's very easy to get in touch with me.
And I will say, even though I did not like the ending, this was a very good read. And I honestly recommend it 100% because there's so many twists and turns that even when I can't give it away, one of the characters things are turned on the character. And I loved it so much when that got turned on the character. I can't say which character, but I loved it so much. I was like,
I'm very happy that you're happy, and I appreciate the kind words.
all right. Chris, thank you so much for coming on and for writing the Cul-de-Sac. Hopefully it won't take you 20 years to publish another book.
I hope not. Yeah, I promise it won't.
Is
Thank you for having me.
Is Half Mast available on Amazon as well?
It's on all major
Okay.
bookstores. Yeah, Amazon has it. It's on Kindle too. I think it's on Kindle Unlimited, so it's free if you have that.
Yeah, I have that. I love my Kindle Unlimited.
I know a lot of people do. That's what I've heard. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And guys, I will put in the show notes everywhere you can find Chris, all his social media. I have everything up here. Also, where you can find The Cul-de-Sac. I highly recommend this book, especially if you like thrillers, because this is a thriller. And I'll also add in his other book as well, so that way you can read. And hopefully he'll come out with something new soon. So
I'm working on it.
When do you think that one that you're working on will be out?
Well, my goal is to finish writing it by Christmas, but
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to make that. I'm going to trying my best. But then, it usually takes like a year for a book to get out or more once you actually get it written. Fingers crossed. Everybody keeps emailing me and rooting me on. It inspires me to get things done.
All right. So until next time, guys, keep chatting. Pick up this book if you love thrillers. Pick up this book even if you don't love thrillers, because the characters in here are so complex and so well developed that normally you don't see a lot of main characters that are so developed. So many main characters that are have so many backstories that you're like, oh, this is cool. Wow, that's interesting. Because your characters are very interesting. I will say that.
Thank you.
So until next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.